it's time to listen to our chief guest. Today, we have with us a very special person as chief guest. She is Ms. Joanna Kane-Potaka, who is the Executive Director at Smart Food Initiative of ICRISAT, International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics. She began her career as an agricultural economist and later moved into the market research in the agri-business area. Since then, she has worked in a wide variety of other marketing related areas, including strategic marketing, communications, fundraising, knowledge management, and uptake of scientific research. She has worked for government, private industry, and with non-profit organizations, including 4 CGIAR agricultural research centers. As part of this, she has lived and worked in India, Sri Lanka, Italy, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Australia, and has 30 years of professional experience. Currently, she also leads the global smart food movement, which was selected in 2017 by USAID and the Australian government as one of the winning top 10 global food innovations. Smart food is food defined as food that is good for you, the planet, and the farmer. Let me proudly invite Ms. Joanna Kane-Potaka for her address. We are honored to have you with us, Ms. Joanna. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. Right. Okay, so I'll talk today about smart food opportunities to achieve the SDG2. What I'll talk about is a particular solution which is a way to have some of the biggest impacts possible on the SDG2. And that is if we diversify staples. So where staples are typically 70% of the plate, whether you're talking across Asia or Africa, and they are typically refined, like white refined rice, refined wheat. So they're low in nutrition and they're very taxing on the environmental needs. So if we could actually diversify staples, that's how we can have a very big impact. But let me take you through the rationale and argument and approach behind this. So if you look through history, where back in the 50s and 60s, the focus was just on food security. It was about having enough food to eat just to survive. And that's where across Asia, the Green Revolution happened. After that, there became more focus and attention to nutrition security. So it wasn't just the amount of food, it was about the quality of the food. Then more recently, the UN talked about sustainable diets. So about diets that are sustainable on the environment. Well, what we saw is that we needed to group all that together and go a step further. So it was what we call smart food. How do we have solutions that are good for you and good for the planet and good for the farmer? Because if we don't bring in that farmer welfare into the equation, then we're going to have a lot more trouble in achieving this SDG2 especially. So now what we found is the biggest hurdle for actually achieving smart food being in our diet. So food that's good for you, good for the planet, and good for the farmer, is what we termed the food system divide. So just like you might have an education divide or a digital divide, if you invest in something, it does really well. And so it attracts more investment. So it does even better and it continues. And then it becomes very difficult for anything else to enter into that space. So what we have done for decades, if we have had the vast majority of investment in the big three, the rice, wheat, and maize. So whether it be the private industry investment, the product development, the government support, even the development aid, the vast majority has gone into the big three. Oh, sorry, I sneezed. So what's happened is their value chains are very well developed, all the way from the consumer awareness and demand, all the way down to the farmer and the seed system. And so it becomes very difficult to diversify these staples because they've been successful, they're well-developed value chains. And if you look here, so these big three, they deliver more than 50% of calories consumed globally, just those three crops. There was a study that came out a couple of years ago that showed that 45% of private sector agricultural research investment around globally, the whole world, went into just one crop, and that was maize, which is really significant. If you look at the change of relative contribution of crops to our diet in the last 50 years, you'll see here how oils, wheat, rice have been the three biggest increases. And then the three biggest decreases are sorghum, cassava, millets, some of the more traditional foods in many areas. I'll give an example here in India, where you can see starting in 1960 up to today, where rice has tripled in the quantity of production. Wheat has increased 800%. And then maize now is also taking off in India, where the traditional, very nutritious millets and sorghum, some of those traditional staples, have stayed very similar. Now you could say, well, does this really matter that we have this domination of the big three in the diets and on farm? Well, let me give you an example from Africa first before I go into the details of why this matters. This is a project that we had in eastern Kenya, and it's a drier zone, and it's an area that suits some of those hardier crops, and like the millets and sorghum. But during difficult economic times, the government gave maize as a free food aid. So people got used to eating maize, so they started planting maize. Now, what happened is maize was not suitable for that agroecology, for those areas with less water. And so that maize production, the maize crop would survive 1 in 4 years, which meant 3 and 4 years the farmers did not have a crop. It failed. Yet they kept planting the maize. Now, if you ask why, it's just because they say it's just easier. Someone comes to the farm gate, sells the seed. Someone comes to the farm gate, buys the grain. They know they can sell it. They know pretty much even the price they will receive. Now, if they went back to millets and sorghum, which are more suitable for those agroecologies, then they have to find the seed. It won't be good quality seed. They have to learn how to grow it again. Then they have to take it to market to sell it. They don't know if they can sell it. They don't know what price they'll receive. And a couple of generations had gone by. They didn't realize they could cook the same ugali food that they were used to, whether they use maize or millet or sorghum or a combination. So when we came there to look at what was more suitable for the agroecology and what was better for diversifying their diets, we had to start from scratch. You had to develop the whole value chain, the seed system, the growing. We had to teach them how to cook it again. They had to get used to the taste. We had to develop agribusinesses. We got women's groups involved with different bakery products. And here, if you look at the two potentially the two biggest challenges that we have globally now, climate change and health and nutrition. So climate change, we need adaptation and mitigation solutions. And if you look at that graph there, it shows up to 10% expected decrease in yields of rice and wheat across Brazil, North Africa, Middle East, South Asia, USA, because of climate change. That's really huge. And we know we're only going to need more food when given the rising population. So we need that more resilient food, crops that will survive with climate change. Health and nutrition, potentially our four biggest issues. Iron, zinc, and vitamin A, which are in the 3 top micronutrient deficiencies globally. Diabetes, which is growing in every continent in the world. Obesity, which is growing in whether you're talking poorer communities or wealthier communities. And cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of deaths globally. So we have big challenges to take on, and we urgently need solutions that will cope with climate change, water shortages, soil degradation, malnutrition, and diet-based health issues. To do that, we have to have more diversity on farm. We have to have more climate-smart, resilient agriculture. We have to have more diversity in our diets, and we have to have healthier diets. And all this needs to be affordable and available. So this is where this smart food comes in. If we could bring smart foods, foods that are good for you, the planet, and the farmer, and bring them in as staples, we can have a bigger impact, and it's needed. So back to this original idea, to have big impact, we need to diversify the staples. How can we need an approach that focuses only on a couple of foods at a time. Because if you're to bring something in as a staple, you've got to develop major value chains. They've got to be global commodities. They've got to be in mainstream. So how can we move from the big 3 to the big 5, later the big 7, and so on? And how can we ensure we do this with smart foods, not just with any foods? It has to be foods that fill that criteria of good for you, good for the planet, good for the farmer. So what we looked at when we were looking at this solution, we looked at, well, what would you focus on first? If you could just focus on a couple of crops at a time and have a dedicated effort and investment to bring them into mainstream as a staple. Well, we selected millets, which often include sorghum as well, to focus on. Now I'll go through the reasons for this. I'm just checking my time. Okay. So if you look at millets and sorghum, there's a very wide range of different millets around the world. They originate from different continents. They grow in different terrains. They grow in the tropics, they grow in the dry lands, they grow in the deserts, they grow in the Himalayas. And they were the staples in many countries across Asia and Africa. They were in China before rice. Some originate from Japan, from China, from India, some originate from Africa. Now we've just released a series of the world's largest studies on the health benefits of millets. One was looking at glycemic index, and what we found is the average glycemic index of millets is low, and the study showed that it does reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So extremely important. And where countries are highly reliant on white refined rice, which is high glycemic index and a major contributor to diabetes, we have to diversify that. We have to bring in other foods with that. And millets are a solution to that. Also, many of the millets are very high in iron and zinc. What I mentioned before are in the top 3 micronutrient deficiencies globally. And the study that we're just about to release this month, it shows that consuming millets does reduce anemia. And we know anemia is a major problem globally, but especially in the developing countries. We've also just this month, last month, released also the world's largest study on millets and their impact on cardiovascular disease, which I mentioned before is the #1 cause of death globally. And it showed that consuming millets does decrease cholesterol, it decreases the blood pressure and decreases the BMI. So it does reduce the risk of developing cardiovascular disease. So it is a major solution that can make a big difference globally. Also, finger millet has 3 times the amount of calcium as milk. That's absolutely huge. We've studied the bioavailability. It's almost the same as milk. So you can get high amounts of calcium from milk. And across many countries, like in Asia, where the vast majority of people are lactose intolerant, this can be a great solution. Millets are also high in fiber. They've got good protein levels, high in antioxidants. So they're good for you. Now, if you look at how they're good for the planet and good for the farmer, they grow with minimal fertilizers and pesticides, so they have a low carbon footprint. They survive with minimal water, 30% less water than maize and 70% less water than rice. They survive in higher temperatures, so very important with climate change. And because they haven't had the same investment as the big 3, who have come close to reaching their yield plateau, they still have great potential for increasing yield. And they have multiple uses. They're used for feed and fodder, as well as food, as well as brewing, as well as biofuels. Now, the time is also right now to invest in these smart foods. The climate change is a priority, and we need these higher resilient foods, crops to come in. The attention on SDG2, the need for nutrition and more healthy diets is critical now. Millets have just started to become an urban food trend in the aspirational market, so there is a trend happening now. There is still a nostalgia around them in many of the countries across Africa and Asia. And they fit some of the biggest global health food trends. They're a superfood, they're an ancient grain, they're gluten-free, they're low glycemic index, they're good for losing weight. Plus, in March this year, the UN General Assembly approved 2023 to be the International Year of Millets. That will be the turning point and the attention to millets. So this is the time to invest now to leverage that International Year of Millets. Now, I think my time's up, so I'll go quickly on the last few slides. There has been a growing trend of more millet products globally. They're in the niche market, but they're expanding. Now, a lot of people don't realize the small millets look like and can be cooked just like rice. So they're an easy alternative to bring in. There actually is a wide range of millets that exist already, millet products, in a wide range of countries. They're still niche, but they can be eaten extruded like a snack for kids. They're in milkshakes. They can be used as a pasta, in breakfast cereals. Here in Germany, you get a pear, apple, and millet juice. You can see here in Milo, instead they use sorghum in the Milo in Africa. You can make a milk out of it. Here in West Africa, Nestle uses pearl millet rather than wheat in their Cerelac. And lots of fun millet mix, millet dosa mix, millet pancake mix, drink mixes. You can pop them like popcorn. So my last slide here, the key points, diversity of staples is needed to have a big impact on SDG2. We need to do this though with smart foods to make sure that's a positive impact, and key approaches. We need to focus on just a couple of smart foods at a time. We need to drive this from the consumer end. We need to build awareness, create a buzz and excitement around these foods. We need to build modern and convenience products, and we need those small and medium enterprises. They are the pioneers. They make change. They need to be supported to bring in these new foods. We need the policy support for this, and we need research priorities to support it. So that's our one solution where we think is going to be very important, along with the other solutions, to have a big impact on SDG2. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Joanna, for that inspiring session. It was great to know more about millets, their health benefits, and also they are good for the planet, a farmer and the planet. Thank you so much for joining us today. And with this, we have come to the end of our opening session. We'll be back after a short break with a session on SDG2, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture.